Hi, this is Stephen and Heather Carson coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri in these United States. I think I forgot to change it from Radical Liberation. Anyway, Mr. and Mrs. RadLib is what it's supposed to say at the bottom. I'm not sure if I can change that anymore. I think once I'm in. Anyway, welcome everyone. We're trying a different time because the impact on our weekend hasn't been great from a family point of view. So trying something crazy and using my lunch break and seeing if we can slip a stream in here, slip a Mrs. RadLib stream in. Hello, British Knight. All right. Well, okay. So this stream is in response to something recent and also just something that we perennially are running into that's not new at all. It's just constant. Right, Heather?
Absolutely.
I'll let you get to the recent in a moment, but I'll just say it is on the order of like a cliche at this point to hear people say, well, but how do your children get socialized if they're homeschooled? How do they function in the real world? Now, I want to be careful here because I think this stream could be seen as about homeschooling, sort of pitching homeschooling. But at least from my point of view, that's not what I have in mind. I want to attack, not pitch something. I want to attack a toxic notion about what it means to be socialized and what is conducive to proper socialization. And of course, that leads us to what in the heck do we even mean when we talk about socialization? Is it even something we want? Or can we at least define it in a way that is something constructive, right? So anyway, you probably heard it too. Homeschooled children are weird. You've got to be in school because you've got to be beaten up a few times to be ready for the real world.
Right.
You got to have the diversity of interactions that you can only get by by the government throwing you into a random group of people of your age, and on and on. Hopefully you get the theme. The idea is this is the best preparation for real life, and you are handicapping your children if you don't put them through this experience. They are not going to function well in the adult world, frankly.
Right.
We can see them failing all around us in the adult world. Actually, I've never heard anyone say that. But for some reason, people, that's sort of the implicit. Implicit is those who were not brought up in that environment are not going to function well in the adult world. I've seen no data indicating that, shall we say, to say the least, or even anecdotal evidence. But that is the implication. If we draw out what's said when they won't function in the real world, well, we should see them functioning badly in the real world, right? And what do we mean by the real world? We mean outside of school, and we mean when people are grown up and have to work with others and get married and function in adult life, right?
Right.
And I just love the tell in all this that we talk about. You need to be in this special environment so that you can function in the real world. Well, wait, so what does that make this other environment? Is it not the real world? How is it different from the real world? Anyway, Heather has thoughts. But first, so I tried to sort of make a generic, right?
Yeah.
This is just something
sweeping
we've been hearing this. We've been hearing this for years, and I just wanted to make sure everybody understands what we're wanting to respond to today. But there was something that happened just last week that kind of brought this up afresh and inspired you to put some notes together.
Well, I had the honor and privilege of being a guest of Poe's on Ramon's Hour. She called it Wife's Hour that day. And it was Poe as well as Mrs. Distributist. And it was a lot of fun. And it's just such a pleasure to be able to sit down and speak with two very intelligent women who are being very thoughtful about the way that they're approaching the world and really wanting to be intentional in terms of how they are raising their children and facilitating their own family. And so I just appreciated being able to be a guest, and it was just wonderful. And if you haven't watched any Ramen Hour, I recommend you go do it. And recently, Poe put out a video called "Women Can Have It All," and I mean, wow, it was an extremely moving video, and it was sort of I'm not crying, you're crying by the end of it. I mean, just so much depth and thoughtfulness as she addresses the topic of motherhood. So if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you go and watch it. And then I was so excited to meet Mrs. Distributus, Helen, and she was having technical difficulties and kind of, came onto the stream a little late and maybe seemed a little flustered at first, and had been cleaning and whatnot. And I mean, to tell you, she was just glowing, just a stunning natural beauty. And she had been doing housework, very trad thing to do, and she comes on and has technical difficulties and just handles it all with grace, and and just brought a lot of intelligence to the conversation. So it was a pleasure to meet her. And so
just mentioning, I'm dropping these links as quick as I can into the live chat. So I've shared Mrs. Radlib's appearance on Poe's Wife's Hour,
right,
and Poe's Women Can Have It All.
That was such a moving video.
Both of those are in the live chat for you.
So awesome. So part of what came up during that conversation was this idea of socialization, and that's not what the whole stream was about. But it was just something that came up, and both women had their thoughts about that, and their thoughts were pretty much what everyone thinks about socialization, this topic. It's sort of the most common question. I've been homeschooling now for about 15, 16 years. And since even before I started homeschooling, people were asking me about what about socialization? What are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to lock my children in a closet and make them memorize their multiplication tables. I mean, we're going to be out in the world. We're out here talking to you, So I wanted to. And
fair enough, Heather, I would say that there's sort of two things going on.
Yeah.
There's, which you'll be addressing heavily, I think, the sort of the sales job that has been done on behalf of the system, right? Mm-hmm. But also, I think there's a minor marketing problem with so-called homeschooling, which is that the name is not terrible. It's got a warmth to it.
Okay.
Right?
Home.
You hear homeschooling, you hear home. So it maybe appeals to you on a deep level.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't think it's really accurate. It's a little misleading. Homeschooling in practice basically just means that you're not schooling your children in the typical way the system expects you to do it.
Right.
Well, non-traditional, right?
Right.
The really quite recent system.
Yeah.
Historically speaking.
Right.
All homeschooling really means is you're not doing that. What homeschooling means in practice, as we've discussed on the homeschooling streams, varies from family to family.
Right. Yeah.
Some
very
people
much so.
are out and about quite a bit.
Yeah.
Heather has a tendency to bring the children just to get out of the house to some degree, but just to be involved with things.
Yeah.
Some families are very heavily involved, and I think you'll have some stories to share.
Yeah.
In contributing to the community in various ways. So it's
a very individualized.
I'm not going to try to replace the label homeschooling. It's what everybody uses. It's stuck.
Yeah.
But just to be a little more accurate, it might be better to say something like not schooling or something, like there's the unschooling movement.
Right.
It's just not the system.
Yeah.
What it actually is.
Yeah.
We'll see there's some common themes, but it can look quite different from
home
family
educating. I don't know. That doesn't.
Just even
we
saying
can talk about it later.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, okay. Well, I wanted to start with a really funny story, which is I got this mom's permission to share this. And this is a mom that I know from our area. There's a smallish co-op that meets near us. And a co-op is simply a cooperative with a group of families who have decided to educate together. And what that looks like is they have a Girl Scout troop that they meet together. They have a park day where they open that up for other families in the area, etc. So I met this mom through one of these park days. And in fact, the first time I went to this particular homeschool group's park day, I arrived and lots of kids were, playing on the play equipment. I think you were there with me. And there were some kids at the very tip top. So there's play equipment where they have like turrets that go all the way up and really high up.
You're supposed to be under the turret.
Under the turret, because the turret acts as like a roof, Right. These kids were actually up at the very top hanging onto the turret. And I looked up and I was like, wow. And then I looked around at the moms and they were like, just going about their business. I'm like, we're in a homeschool group.
Yeah.
So very chill, very relaxed, kids taking risks. No one's freaking out. Okay.
Yeah.
So I got permission from this mom to share this story. So she says in May, and I'm just going to read off my paper. In May, we took our homeschooled Girl Scout troop, which was 13 girls ages 11 to 18, on a 5-day trip to Kentucky. At our first stop, there was a movie being filmed at the little zoo we visited. Toward the end of our visit there, we were all visiting with some critters close to where the filming was taking place, and the girls started drifting over to watch what was going on. One of the actors was kind enough to step over and chat with them. They spent a good amount of time with him, explaining what was going on with the filming, and he was answering all their questions. They told him about the trip that we were on and where we were going. After a rather lengthy chat, he asked them where they went to school. When they responded that they were homeschooled, he said something along the lines of, "Oh, that's nice, but what about socialization?" And she says, there's so much bias out there that despite seeing that this was a pack of 13 kids who all knew each other well enough to take a trip together and could carry on a nice conversation with a stranger for quite a long time, he still had to voice that as his number one concern. She's still kind of laughing about that, but I hear a story like that and I don't even know what to say. It just sort of like stuns me. Okay. So, okay. What is socialization? So I think we should start with the definition. And so.
Oh, this is.
You have a thought?
No. I mean, is this your article?
This is my article.
Yeah, I just wanted to share it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So recently I wrote an article for Intellectual Takeout called The Question of Socialization. I'm just going to pull a little bit from that.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned this, but Heather is starting to write regularly for them.
Yeah.
So if you find that interesting, then I'll share two things. I'll share her page that has all her articles, and then I'll share the particular article she's sharing from. Anyway,
Great.
If you just can't get enough of Mrs. Radlib, now she's writing articles. So
Thank you very much. Okay, so Merriam-Webster defines socialization as simply the process beginning during childhood by which individuals acquire habits, values, and attitudes of a society. Okay. There's different types of socialization. There's primary socialization, which is kind of similar to the basic definition, in that it focuses on the learning of values, norms, and cultural practices and takes place during childhood and adolescence. And then there's developmental socialization, and that's the process by which social skills are developed within a social institution, such as school. Okay, so under this type of socialization, the skills for making friends, resolving conflict, mediating boundaries, are learned. Okay, so that's our very basic definition. All right, so the question that we need to be asking here is, does the traditional mode of socialization, the school setting, hold up to these definitions? Does the school setting do a good job of communicating our values? Does it do a good job of helping kids make friends, resolve conflict, mediate boundaries? Does it help them to learn to socialize with others? Does it teach cultural practices? So does it do those things? All right, well, let's think about it. All right. So the argument that I heard on the recent stream on Women's Hour is kids need to be around other kids, sort of go to the school of hard knocks and really rub up against other kids and have perhaps parts of their personality that are rough around the edges, have those smoothed out, right? There's this idea that they need to, that it's really the peer group that provides them with the best way of helping people to maybe not be annoying,
Right.
to learn, hey, that part of that thing that you're doing, well, that doesn't work. And so you need to stop doing that,
Yeah. And by the way, this is a genuine concern. And I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this, I thought pretty interestingly, because he said he was observing, or I guess over the course of his career as a professor, a change in how the young college folks were interacting with people, because he attributed it in part to more children being from single child homes. And he said there
Right.
is something about having siblings
Yes.
that socializes you, right?
It really does.
And he saw that the increasing percentage of people who did not go through that process with siblings was starting to change the tone on campus. And it's not black and white, right? He said, there were always children from single parent homes, or single child homes,
right.
but they were a minority in the past. Well, once they start to become half the kids there, maybe, I don't know if that's too extreme to say that, but a quarter to a half. Well, now the way they're accustomed to interacting starts to set the tone more and more.
Right.
Right. It starts to really change the whole vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there is a real concern here. The question is how to address it.
Absolutely. Right? We do want to have people understanding how to behave with other people. This is really important. If we are going to live together, bless you. If we're going to be living together, working together, being in a community together, we need to learn the basics of how to interact with each other. The golden rule: treat others as you wish to be treated. But does the school setting actually do that? And what I and many others suggest is that it does not. It does not. So one example, John Taylor Gatto, maybe you've heard his name. He was the New York State Teacher of the Year back in 1991, and he wrote a book called Dumbing Us Down. And what he points out is that from the very moment a child enters into the school system, they are thrust into a world that is detached from the real world. It is a manufactured world. So he says it's absurd and anti-life to be a part of a system that compels you to sit in confinement with people of exactly the same age and social class as yourself. So this idea that there is this diversity in the traditional, what we now know as the traditional school, is absurd. You are really in a classroom with people of your own age, of your own class, all day long, every single day for about 13 years, if you go through school in that system.
Right.
Okay. So the system,
it's very artificial, actually.
It is very artificial. And the system effectively cuts you off from the immense diversity of life and variety. And, it cuts you off from your past and your future, sealing you in this continuous present, much the same way that a television does. Now, those are his words. And in his book, he was in particular arguing against the use of TV and technology in the school system, that this was really a trendy thing. It wasn't real education. It was a fad. And I am addressing that idea in my next article for Intellectual Takeout. So,
and by the way, just that some people here will immediately be thinking of Jacques Ellul here. Jacques Ellul's propaganda, where it talks about when you're propagandizing people, you need to keep them in the present. That's what what Gatto's reminding me of. You've got to, like Orwell talked about this as well. You can't be thinking about the past. You need to think about they want you to be thinking about whatever the current line is, right? Don't bring up what the line was 10 years ago.
Right.
And so anyway, I think that's something that's toxic about the system that Gatto puts his finger on, which is to trap us in that presentist kind of thing. I remember in school, I would feel like, oh, so I guess people from 50 years ago were barbarian troglodytes, and we are at the pinnacle of being cool, hip, knowledgeable, and moral. I mean, I literally was thinking about that as a teenager. I'm like, this doesn't feel plausible to me. And yet I'm somehow getting this message, this signal to me. You know?
Sort of chronological snobbery.
Yeah.
Well, so, peer group segregation isn't healthy. It isn't real life. It isn't normal. And it does not cultivate empathy for other people of other age groups. Now, one of the things that Mrs. Distributus pointed out in one of the schools near where she lives is that this particular school actually pairs older kids with younger kids in kind of a buddy system. And so kids in the older grade are paired with kids in the younger grade, and they facilitate a relationship between the two. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's a really lovely way to break out of this peer group segregation. Okay. But again, this idea, if our definition of socialization is that we are trying to communicate values, we're trying to communicate, what did I say? Values, habits, forgive me, I'll turn my paper over. I'm getting lost here. Things that are relevant to the norms of the larger society. Having a child all day long for the time equivalent of a full-time job for adults, every single day in this classroom, it's a very sealed world. It's a very small world, right?
And that's just the classroom. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, but there's also just the social environment, right? We find that children who are in schools, what matters to them is not even their peers. That would make you think that if you said that and took it literally, that would make you think that, a 13-year-old is just going to tend to get along well with other 13-year-olds. But we have not found that to be the case.
No.
They get along, or they pay attention to, nervously pay attention to, I should say, children who are the ones that matter at school, basically, right?
Right.
If you are from a different school, if you're a homeschooled kid, whatever, and it doesn't matter that you're their age or whatever, you're irrelevant to them. They don't see you, And of course, this is the experience I notice with many government schooled kids in particular, and interacting with them as an adult. I am not part of that sort of hermetically sealed world that they live their life in. And so they kind of don't see me, and to some degree they won't look at me.
Yeah.
You've noticed this.
Oh, yeah.
They'll look down.
Well, and I've noticed it most specifically with regards to our children. We lived in a different neighborhood prior to moving here, and there were lots of kids in this neighborhood. Of course, during the day, everyone was gone because I think there were only one other homeschool family that we knew of in the neighborhood. And of course, our older kids became friends with that girl. But what I noticed is that friendships were beginning at a younger age, but then as the kids got older, there was a self-consciousness that developed with the kids who were in the public school, such that my kids got snubbed by them because there was this intense concern over what other people thought. Okay, and that kind of brings me to one of my next points, which is that the peer group segregation leads to a dysfunctional focus on peer acceptance. So because my kid was not within that pure system in that pure subworld, she was then rejected, even though she was the same age as this other girl, because the other girl had shown up to the neighborhood park with some of her friends from school. And if she befriended or was nice to my daughter, then she might be rejected by her peers that she went to school with. So it becomes the focus on conformity and peer acceptance. And we grew up with the term peer pressure. It's like the system itself is producing these kind of dysfunctional ways of relating. And then the higher ups are trying to come against it. And they're like, oh no, Now there's peer pressure. We've got to do talks about that. We've got to have
Yeah, right,
people
right.
come into the system to try to
Oh,
squash down the things that the very system are creating. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then you've got movies like Mean Girls, which highlight exactly this very thing that is created by the system. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the socialization that these kids are getting within the system. Everybody knows it. There's a bazillion high school films about it.
Yeah.
We show our kids some of these high school films so that they can see how the other half live. Okay.
By the way, this is such an entertaining experience. We both went through government school
Right.
all the way from beginning to end, K through 12.
Mhm.
And then our children, none of them have been in, like, they
Right.
stepped. Oh, my daughter said, "Oh, we were disappointed when for some
We
reason,
visited your old school.
on a reunion or something, we went to my old school and walked through it." And she said, "Well, that meant that we had stepped foot in a school." And I thought it'd be cool to be able to say I never even stepped foot in a school. Anyway,
we dashed her dreams of that.
yeah, Madeline, that's in the stream here,
Yeah.
in the chat.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, where was I going?
Peer group acceptance, Mean Girls, blah blah
Right.
blah. Films about schooling.
Yeah.
There we go.
And so what's funny to me is I watch, The Breakfast Club,
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. That's brutal.
Mean Girls, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's all very heavily in the context of an American government school,
Oh my gosh.
right?
I still
And,
seeing seeing The Breakfast Club, and afterwards I was like, I feel seen.
Yeah, right.
For the first time, I was like,
Right.
I feel seen.
Yeah, I know.
Gosh.
It's
brutal.
It's a good question whether Americans have made more movies about the trauma of war or more movies about the trauma,
of school.
Yeah. Anyway,
Very good segue to my next point, but go on.
Yeah, don't lose it.
I won't lose it.
So we show our homeschooled children, homeschooled teenagers now, these movies set in government school, which they have never attended, and we did. And it is just so amazing to see what they're seeing in it.
Yeah.
And partially it's just amazing to me that they even are interested to watch them, because I'm like, nothing of this world. What do you
Ferris
even...
Bueller's Day Off is like a perfect film. I mean,
Well,
you got
that's
it.
true.
It's so good.
Hard to beat that. But what are they even getting out of it?
Yeah.
Right. Watching a movie with this context that they have no experience of. For me, the experience of a movie like Breakfast Club, I mean, I'm thinking of...
Bender is really scary.
Yeah.
The character Bender, he's really scary.
Which one?
That's the guy who's like, he's got the plaid shirt on. He's like the grunge guy, and he's being abused at home, and he's
right. Yeah, and he's got rage, and
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you watch these films, and we're thinking of people in our lives, who are fitting these sort of stereotypes or whatever. So for my children, I'm like, what do you even connect with when you watch a movie like this? But anyway, it's quite entertaining to the conversations we have, and where they will say things like, "So wait, does stuff like this really happen?" We're like, "Oh yeah," and they're like, "Really? That's terrible." And we're like, "Oh, it is actually."
Oh, I know. I already knew it was terrible.
Yeah, I know.
Absolutely.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too.
yeah. So, but you. This is a good segue to the next point, which is bullying. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ali says high school movies about high school are the David Attenborough documentary. David Attenborough documentary for homeschooled children. Oh my goodness.
Gosh, please somebody do a voiceover in that voice for one of these films. That would be amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, David Attenborough.
Brilliant.
There you go.
Oh, totally brilliant. Okay.
And here we see the schooled child approaching another schooled child. A fight for dominance ensues.
Man.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, okay. I'm going to be laughing at that one for a while. Okay. So there's this idea that adversity, the special kind of adversity that kids experience in the traditional school, in the public school, even private school, it's the same system. Okay. Kids are still age segregated. It's the same thing. Okay. Public or private. That basically this idea that some amount of trauma, some amount of adversity makes a kid stronger. It makes them better able to deal with life. Okay. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Bullshit. What doesn't kill you gives you an anxiety disorder. Okay. What doesn't kill you messes you up. Okay. Adversity does not make a person more resilient. There is no research to support this. Okay. I'm coming at you from a professional standpoint. There is no research to support that adversity leads to more resilience. There just isn't anything to support that. Okay. So the more adversity you experience, the more likely you are to have depression, anxiety, drug addiction. Okay. All these things. You can go online and take an adversity exam, or, and it's called the ACE quiz. And you can actually go through and assess yourself. Have I had any of these adverse childhood experiences?
You got like 100% on that.
Oh, God, don't even talk about my childhood. But it does focus a lot on family, okay, neglect and abuse, but it also focuses on community, okay, and school is a part of the community. These days, kids are having to literally practice being shot at by other students. Okay. And it's traumatizing. And I remember during the pandemic, mothers coming online and saying, wow, this was really eye-opening. My kid is home and saying to me stuff like, well, at least I don't have to worry about being murdered by one of my other students today. Okay. That is an adverse childhood experience. Okay. And having to go to school with the fear of being beat up, sexually harassed. Let me just tell you something. Okay. The school that I went to for high school, there was a hallway where a lot of the male athletes would line up, and they were all joking and joshing around with each other. And if a girl would have to walk down that hallway, because the hallway was lined on both sides with guys, she was very likely going to get sexually harassed, grabbed at, groped, whatever. Now, if a teacher walked by and saw it, they would turn their backs and it was like nothing was going on. That is an adverse childhood experience. When you go to school knowing that this is going to happen and that the teachers aren't going to be able to do anything about it, that this is going to be hanging over your head every single day, that counts as an adverse childhood experience. And this is what these kids are dealing with every single day. This is what I dealt with every single day going to school.
Let me ask you about this comment.
Okay.
What do you think of this? Short-term high-stress trauma, thank you, Insulted 25, that is overcome makes you stronger. Long-term low-level trauma just messes you up. I think maybe something would need to be added to this, but I think what he's saying is, you're supported, you're emotionally supported, you're bonded, you have good bonds and all that, and then bad things happen, right?
You're in a car accident,
you get hurt,
it's traumatic,
you lose a parent, whatever, but you have support, you overcome it. I think that's kind of the scenario he's talking about. Where the other is the situation you're painting, which is, I'm just going to continually be in danger or actually outright abused or assaulted, and no one's going to do anything about it. No one's going to help me deal with it. I'm just a kid stuck with being low-level traumatized for years. He's saying that is really, that is toxic. So it's a good comment, actually.
Yes. Right? So we call that toxic adversity. And it's toxic because in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a very well-researched book, he notes that this over a long period of time, low-level adversity and trauma and stress creates physical disorders, not just depression, anxiety, that sort of thing. It creates autoimmune disorders. I mean, it gets in your body. So, okay. So how about this? I'm going to give you guys sort of a relational red pill. Okay. How your child spends most of their day and is going to affect how they relate for the rest of their life. Okay. That's why we're even having this discussion.
Habituation.
Habituation. Okay. But it's not just habituation in terms of what you can see out here. Okay, habituation happens at a neurological level in the brain. Okay, that's why it's
physiological.
It's physiological. That's why it takes years of therapy for people who have difficult traumatic experiences in their childhood with their primary attachment figures, it takes them years to break through the emotional inertia that is created by being in those situations where they're learning helplessness and they can't get out of it. And so then they end up recreating those situations and marrying someone that abuses them, or going through woman after woman after woman, because they're reenacting that trauma, because that's what's familiar to them, because the neural pathways were formed when they were young, and there's an inertia that comes with that. Okay, so socialization training in the public schools works the same way. The younger and younger and younger you put your kid into that kind of a system, the earlier that training begins, and then those neural pathways are formed and it becomes ingrained. And so they become to expect, they come to expect abuse because that's what's normal, right? Additionally, teachers are so burned out. They're so burned out. Why? Because kids are looking to teachers as if they're a primary attachment, because they are. They're taking the place of the parents, right? Teachers have to do not just education now, they have to do self-esteem training. They have to do essentially therapy with their kids in their classroom, because these kids, they're from divorced homes. They don't have a supportive parent at home. So they're looking to the teachers as a primary attachment.
Yeah.
They're forming an emotional bond with the peers over their parents. Okay. And they prefer the peers. And then by the time they get to adolescence, they're in this sort of insular subworld where they're getting sexually active from a very young age. The teachers are just instructed to hand them a condom. They can go and get an abortion, or they used to be able to, without communicating with the parents. And there's just this utter severing of the parental relationship. That's what school socialization does. That's what it sets kids up for. And it's with intention. That's the intention of it, to create an unhealthy autonomy for these children. It's not that I don't see children as having autonomy. I do. And I teach that. This is your body. You get to say no.
Right.
If someone is touching
you don't get to say no at school.
You don't get to say no at school. You don't. I mean, if you do, you'll be abused worse. And harassed and and beat up even more.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you tell on your abuser, oh boy, then you're really going to get it.
Snitches get stitches.
That's right. Okay. So I guess I know there's going to still be people who disagree with what I'm saying. Maybe you went to school and had a fantastic experience. I know people who did. I know people who really thrived in that environment. They really did. Some of those people peaked in high school. What do we mean by that? They thrived so much in that environment that they don't know how to live in the real world.
Because it is a very highly artificial.
It's a highly artificial
situation.
world.
Yeah.
They don't know how to live
in real life. You're not with people who are your exact same age. The pecking order of high school, right? Who's on top in high school does not necessarily translate to adult life. Right. So on and so forth. Hey, really good comment from Black Horse here. Oh. He says, it's really disgusting to have authority figures in your life as a child constantly suborn your abuse.
It really is.
What you highlighted, which is the adults will see things and just be like, deal with the kid, Right. This is, and imagine what that trains you for as you go into adult life and have authority, right? You're supposed to, there's a big emphasis right now on, I as a people manager have to really call out or report or confront or whatever any kind of like sexually abusive behavior, right?
Right.
Well, that's not what high school training for.
Yeah.
In high school, it's like keep your head down, right?
Well, and
the authority. I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. What I wanted to say is that is not what was modeled to me by the authorities in the school. Yeah. What that is to actually address things in a appropriate and direct way. Conflict management. Yeah, you don't get any of that.
No. Absolutely.
I mean, we had a coach who would basically just lose his temper and physically abuse kids. That was probably one of the better authorities we had.
Right. Now, I want to just say there is healthy adversity. I mean, we've talked about toxic adversity, which I think is a lot of what you get in the public school. There's healthy adversity. Sports is healthy adversity, where you're getting to learn to maybe get out some of your frustration. You're getting to learn to deal with conflict within a set of rules. That can be an example of healthy adversity. Clubs, being a part of clubs, where you're having to pursue a goal together and you have disagreements and then you have to work through it in order to, obtain your goal. So there is healthy adversity. But what I'm saying is that a lot of what goes on in the school is not an example of healthy adversity. And I do think that when kids are working together on a project together, where it's a short-term thing and they've got good adult support and all those kinds of things, that can be another example of healthy adversity. So I know some kids have come through the school system and have made it through, and they would look back on their school and say, hey, it was I did fine. So anyway, I want to throw that out there, and I think I really just hope to start a conversation, get people thinking about this, and really let's keep talking about it. Let's keep trying to figure this out. So, okay, the last point I want to make in terms of about the school socialization situation as I transition into homeschool is the importance of time with one's family. Okay, so a child's parents and siblings comprise their primary support system and are where they really learn the basics of communication, including verbal and nonverbal communication, as well as boundaries and limitations. Your family is really where you're going to be learning that. So, but one of the trends that happened sometime after probably when I was in college, maybe even a little bit before, is you start seeing all these early childhood centers popping up more and more and more.
Yeah,
and kids
that's been freaking me out.
It freaked me out too.
And when they say early childhood, do you happen to know what the ages are? Like
Let's see.
early
I
is
substitute taught in an early childhood center, and it was basically preschool. It's basically preschool. It's like a state preschool.
Like 4-year-olds?
Younger than that.
Younger. 3-year-olds?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so these early childhood education programs are supposed to prepare kids for going into the school, right? So it's pre-socialization for socialization.
Yeah.
Okay. They become classroom trained and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, that's a great phrase.
Yeah,
you didn't mention that yet.
Classroom
That
trained.
is a phrase if you haven't heard it. Classroom trained.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In fact, someone just made a comment I can highlight on this. Vingle says, I hated sitting quietly on a hard wooden chair for 6 to 8 hours every day, just looking out at the fresh air, fidgety and wanting to play. Words cannot explain how much I resented that. Yeah, Vingle, you were being classroom trained.
Yeah.
Aren't you blessed?
Yeah. Self-control is a good thing to learn. It can be learned at home. It doesn't have to be.
But also what Vingle's bringing up is he was a boy, and it's specifically been challenging for young boys to be classroom trained,
right?
Because that's just not what young boys are built for.
Right.
They're built to be physical, and this is why that great, I'm going to forget her name, darn it, but the great phrase from the one lady was
free range kids lady.
No, it's a different lady actually. She said the school system treats boys as defective girls.
Oh yeah,
right. And it is hilarious to watch how they're homeschooling our young boys.
Oh my gosh!
Because she's like reading them history, and they're literally wrestling.
Yeah.
And then you'll say, "Boys, you're just wrestling. What did I just say?"
They repeat what I said.
And they'll repeat.
They're listening.
They're absorbing it somehow,
They are.
even as they're wrestling on the living room floor while you read. Yeah, anyway.
They are. I know, it's crazy. So family life. Okay, so if kids are at school 6 to maybe 8 hours a day if they've got sports after school activities, when is family life happening?
Right.
right?
In the cracks.
In the cracks, exactly. And I think for a lot of people, the pandemic was like a wake-up call, and their kids were, basically getting detox. They were like, whoa, boy, am I glad to be home. I'm not going to be shot at.
We heard about a lot of
Yeah,
reports
mhm.
of parents saying my children are like more
Yeah.
relaxed.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, they were happier, they were calmer. They were able to work through problems on their own time. They were able to go a little bit deeper, but also, just spending time together. There's a lot to be said for just being together and not necessarily having somewhere to go or something to do, or just being together really helps to strengthen those bonds. And certainly I know parents who absolutely love their kids and are very, very involved with their kids' lives and the school system. And those really are the kids who end up being able to navigate school because of the tremendous parental involvement. But a lot of parents don't have the time for that. We've got the mom working a job, we've got dad working a job, we've got, and so, the time with family is just this afterthought.
Yeah, I mentioned in the chat, Heather, we're programmed to discount family relationships and thinking about socialization.
Yes.
You notice that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When people say, but how do you get socialized? They're not thinking about the bonds within the family.
No, at all.
And what that does for you
At
as
all.
a social animal, which we know from research and many other things is highly valuable.
Absolutely.
Family bonds are your primary bonds.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You're really right. When people say, what about socialization? They're not talking about, it's like the socialization that is being learned at home with parents and siblings isn't even a thought. That's not even considered. Yeah. I mean, when they're asking the question, they're not even thinking, oh, well, they're being socialized at home with their parents and siblings, and they're not even thinking about that.
Yeah. I don't know if we've ever had, maybe we have. Have we ever had someone say, 8 children? Wow, so your children really have a lot of friends right there at home. That would be a sensible comment to make. I don't know that we've ever heard anyone say that.
Right. Well, that's a really good segue. So as a lot of you know, we do homeschool. Okay. Yeah. And I'm not judging anybody who's not homeschooling, but of course I am a little biased. I do think that homeschooling is right now a better alternative to the public school and private school situations, simply because private schools have just adopted the same, type of socialization methods.
And often, by the way, the private schools are not as independent as we'd like to think.
Oh, no.
They have legal pressure.
They're getting government funds.
Yeah.
They're getting government funds.
They end up having to basically folloh a lot of the rules of the government schools.
If the government is giving your school, which happens to be a Christian school, be it Catholic, Lutheran, non-denominational Christian school, if the government is giving your school money, then you're a government school.
He who pays the piper calls the tune. Yep.
You're a government. That's a government
school. That's how it
works.
Yeah.
That's a government school. And it's only a matter of time. You're only going to be able to keep them out of it for a certain amount of time. And then you're going to be pulling your kids because, or maybe you won't be pulling your kids because you haven't made decisions, choices, sacrifices necessary to be able to transition them to be at home. This is all about choices. You know what I mean? So, okay. So, of course I'm going to talk about homeschooling because that's been my experience. So parents, homeschooled kids are more securely attached to the parents because they're with their parents. And, again, the biggest, objection to homeschooling that I've heard from mothers is I'm not patient enough. Okay. So right then and there, patience has to do with conflict management. We did a whole stream on this, how the virtue of patience is absolutely key and crucial to managing conflict in the home and conflict with any and all of your relationships. So if you're not patient enough, that is something you can learn. That's good news. Good news. If you have bad habits, that means you can learn good habits. That's what your dad always used to say. Mm-hmm. So if you are at home and you're having conflicts with your kids, you can learn to be patient and you can learn to work through those conflicts. And so there you go, conflict management, and you're with your kids, you're having time together. And so there's an opportunity for a more secure attachment. One thing that I have observed, and I have also seen this in the research, is that homeschooled kids are better at risk taking because they're not, because conformity is not top of mind for these kids. They'll just take risks. I mean, just like the story of those kids climbing to the very top of the peak of that turret on that
playground.
On the playground. I cannot count on both of my hands the times where I was out at a park with my homeschooled kids, where I was with other kids who happened to be public schooled, and my kids were called out for taking risks that the other kids did not want to take, for fear of being reprimanded, for fear of not conforming, for fear of not being made fun of, and for fear of authorities in their lives. My kids just don't have those fears.
And sometimes our kids would like lead the way in doing something, then the other kids are like, and then they join in,
and then they would do it. Yeah, exactly. So the other thing is that because I'm in charge of our kids' schedule, I can cultivate a diversity of social interactions with my kids. We can visit the elderly. I had a good friend. She's since moved away from the area, so I don't really get to see her very much. But she did the coolest thing that I thought was so neat. And I actually sent my kids with her a couple times. But she went to an old folks home and initiated bringing her kids there for a game day. So they picked an afternoon every week, and she just brought her kids, and they brought games, and they were at the table, and they were just available to play board games with the elderly there at this home. And this was a very intentional thing that she did for her children and for the elderly in her community. That's amazing.
Yeah.
How often do you hear about teenagers seeking out interactions with the elderly? And these kids loved it. Her kids were not like, oh, do we have to go there again? They really enjoyed it. One of our kids was recently on a mission trip, and they were doing construction in this older woman's home, fixing up her home. And our child sat down with this elderly lady and just listened to her stories and talked to her. And it was a delight. Same daughter up the street. We've got a really adorable elderly couple up the street, and they had another couple coming to help them clean out their house. And they asked Madeline to come and help as well. And she went up there, and she says it was wonderful just sitting there listening to these stories. If she had not been homeschooled, she would not have that rich experience of being able to sit down with these older women and listen to their funny stories. So the other thing is that, with homeschooling, you're very intentional about the friendships. You're not just thrown into a group of people where you have to, try to find who you're going to connect with and make it work. You have to be very intentional about it. And so that's something that as a homeschool mother, if I don't have support, if there's not people around me, and that is something that I have struggled with, because any neighborhood I've lived in, there just hasn't been any kids because they're all in the schools. So I have had to seek out homeschool groups, and there are a plethora of them that meet regularly, all ages, from young moms to moms my age. And these groups are very well organized. They have Valentine's parties, Halloween parties, Christmas proms, homecoming dances, art shows where kids can compete and submit their art, and some of these kids are lifelong friends. They've really gotten to know each other. And so,
just a quick comment, and bear in mind we've got 18 minutes till I have a meeting.
Oh my, okay, we're gonna wrap it up.
And I did want to highlight some comments people have been making. Bear in mind, just in case, for those who somehow stumbled on this and don't know, homeschooling's come a long way, baby. When I was a kid, man, if I had even just heard about homeschooling, I would have begged.
Oh yeah.
But I didn't even hear about it.
Yeah.
Now that was back in the 70s when I was in grade school.
Yeah.
Things have changed so much. And they had already changed quite dramatically before 2020.
Yeah.
And then the lockdowns came, and I don't have numbers on it yet, but my rough guess is that homeschooling probably doubled by the time the dust cleared.
That's true.
Some people had to do it, and then they were able to get their kids back in school.
Yeah.
But enough people, I think, they had just never tried it, and they were like, how do you do it? But once they basically had to, they were like, oh, this isn't so bad. My kid's thriving.
Yeah.
I'm not sending them back.
Right.
So
exactly.
my rough guess is that something like a doubling of homeschooling. So that means more groups, more people at park days, more people doing art shows together, et cetera, et cetera. The infrastructure for homeschooling, the curriculum that are available. If you're interested in this, you don't have children yet, or you have a baby and you're like, I just wouldn't even know where to get started. Try to find a homeschooling conference. Yeah, I would want to send you there so that you can see the resources are available, the vendors and all that.
Right.
But mostly I would want to send you there so you can go there and go, oh, this is a whole world of activities and groups. And there's where do you start? It's a cornucopia of options.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway. Yeah. Well, so since we have 15 minutes or whatever to finish up here. So weird. Homeschool kids are weird. Yeah, they are weird. Yeah, they are. When weird means they're not unhealthily attached to their peers. They can interact with people of all age groups and really talk to adults as well as young children. When, that is weird because most people are growing up in this very cut off from real life kind of world. And we need more of the kind of weird that homeschool kids are bringing in order to heal our communities, in order to heal our society. We need more of that. And homeschool kids are weird because they're actually allowed to be themselves, right? And it's so weird because, to use that word, overuse that word, you go into the public school and you see all this self-esteem propaganda, and they're like, be yourself, but you're not really allowed to be yourself. If you're yourself, and that part of being yourself means you're like nerdy about this one particular thing that nobody else is into, then you get made fun of for it. If you're nerdy about something in the homeschool community that no one else is into, people are like, oh, wow, you really know a lot about that. Tell me about that. And then they really, want to learn about it. So homeschool kids come to social interactions more secure. So again, contrary to this idea that toxic, prolonged stress and adversity leads to stronger individuals, which is not true. We have no research to support that. Secure kids who are securely attached come to social interactions more secure. They're operating from a place of strength and confidence in who they are. And they're also not going to be subjected to peer pressure the way that these kids. So think about the kinds of peer pressure that is out there right now that you don't want your kids being subjected to. I'm not going to name it, but just think about it. Think about things that are out there. Wouldn't you like your children to be able to stand up against that, knowing who they are, with a sense of security? I do. Sibling relationships. That is something which you've already brought up. Provide a more than adequate social correction for the development of boundaries in your individuals. Siblings are so hardcore with each other, people. Goodness. It is brutal. And you can't get away from each other. And so the conflict has got to be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to work it out, and you're related, to each other. It's got to be worked out. I'm telling you what, I do more group therapy as a mom than I ever did as a therapist. Let's sit down and let's deal with this.
Right.
This is how, just today we were dealing with the conflict. One kid was set down her apple for just a second. The other kid was like, ooh, you're done with that apple. And he grabbed that apple and he threw it away. She's in tears. You took my food. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you threw it away. So now we had to sit down and go, okay, let's talk about boundaries. That food belonged to her. You don't get to take her food and decide when she's done. All these kinds of things, all the concerns about how to deal with other people are dealt with siblings within the family structure, the golden rule, all those kinds of things. Okay. So, let me see if there's anything else. Okay. Yeah. So homeschooled kids are living in real life, not a life in an age segregated subworld where socialization occurs in rare stolen moments between ringing bells. And I'll give you one really funny example from one of my kids. She was in a conversation from a teen who was public school, and this teen was questioning her about socialization. And the conversation went something like this. Teen said, so, my kid was talking about being homeschooled, and he was like, so how do you talk to people? And she responded, well, I'm talking to you right now. And he goes, well, I mean, it might not happen again. And I mean, it's funny, right? But at the same time, it's like, these friendships and the conversations and the socializing that is occurring, and the abuse and the bullying and all this stuff is occurring in sort of these stolen moments between ringing bells or the lunchroom. Oh God, the lunchroom. The lunchroom is like, ugh, just a terrible, terrible place, But homeschool kids are really engaged in the immense diversity of life. They're in my city alone. There are dozens of homeschool groups that meet on a weekly basis for the purpose of nurturing and developing lifelong friendships. There are gym classes, soccer clubs, dance classes, chess clubs. This is all homeschool stuff. Okay. There is a school for the arts near us that dedicates an entire day to providing arts-related classes. They can learn an instrument. They can take an art class.
And their target for this is the homeschool
all
community.
for the homeschool community.
That is
the entire day.
You're doing like your regular subjects Monday through Thursday,
Right.
and then on Friday you go take violin at that place.
That's
or
right.
whatever.
The opportunities are literally endless.
Yeah.
Okay. And family time is very valued among homeschoolers.
Yeah.
And those primary relationships become the secure base from which children can learn conflict management, as well as valuing people of all age groups. So the question of socialization isn't really a question, for homeschoolers. But for kids stuck in the dysfunctional school system, it's a crisis. It's really a big problem. So
I'm going to jump right to some comments that I wanted to address because we just got a little bit of time.
Yep.
This is a little bit earlier. Black Horse said there's plenty of adversity in the real world to overcome. No need to manufacture it.
Yeah.
That's
well
right.
put. Well put.
Yeah. And I had shared that. So let's see what else. Madeline says you can have experiences where you have to learn to deal with bullying without having to be stuck with bullies every day of the week.
Yes.
Yeah. So that goes back to that comment about isolated things that you deal with support versus low level things that everybody just says.
That's just the way it is.
Essentially, the message you get is you're on your own, kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's her point there. Prudent Posey says Mean Girls is honestly a pretty solid argument for homeschooling. Yeah. Great movie.
Yeah.
Zerzetsor says, but my socialization has always struck me as the sad last attempt to save the school system. Yeah. So this reminds me of how the socialists.
I thought that too. Yeah.
This reminds me of how the socialists went from socialism will bring about more rapid industrialization and all this stuff. We'll all be richer. Eventually, they stopped saying that because every time socialism was put in practice, it didn't result in that. And so they would say things more like, well, socialism will make us more equal. Yeah, that's it. I
never get asked about education.
Similar idea. At one point, homeschooling was criticized as that it was going to have poor academic outcomes.
Yeah, well,
that's been so blown away that nobody bothers to bring that up. I haven't heard that.
No, they only beat the
social. I haven't heard that ever.
No one says that anymore.
It's just the socialization.
Yeah, they only beat the socialization drum because that's all they've got left.
That's right. Very good point, sir. Brett says, getting rid of mixed age cohorts is a prerequisite for killing natural mentoring and institutionalizing all training and education. Yeah. Right. So the old one-room schoolhouse, right? You had the older children.
Hey,
the younger children.
What? Bring back the old, very local neighborhood one-room schoolhouse. Boom. There you go.
That wouldn't be bad.
That would be great. You don't want to homeschool? One-room schoolhouse. In fact, there's something very similar to that happening in my community. It's called a homeschool co-op.
Yeah.
It's called shared learning time. And it's basically a group of moms. And 3 days a week, you send your kids off just like you would to a normal school. They're there for the day. They do the learning there. It's very, very small classrooms. Lots of different age groups are interacting with each other. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you do the rest of the homeschooling.
Right.
Boom.
Yeah. Like I said,
it's a hybrid situation.
This is a really good example of why I'm saying be careful about that term homeschooling. It just means we're not participating in the system that gets handed to us by the government. We're doing other kinds of things. It doesn't mean we never have a child in a class.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We do.
Yep.
In fact, our teens are now attending junior college.
Yes.
Mixed in with what they're doing at home.
Right.
Hello says kids can be some of the most rotten bastards. You don't want your kids learning from the world's kids. Yeah, actually, I agree. How do we train our children?
Mm-hmm.
We disciple them.
Yeah.
And that means the older, the more senior, the more skilled or whatever,
mm-hmm.
trains the younger, the less skilled. Mm-hmm. You're passing on your wisdom and your experience and your skills to the younger person, right?
Right.
What do kids have to teach each other? Here we have, a discussion about sexuality with a bunch of 8-year-old boys. Wow, that's probably going to result in really good stuff.
I remember teaching about the teachings about sexuality. 5th grade, everyone was ushered into the gymnasium and sat down to watch movies about our bodies and sexuality. I wonder, I think it was maybe about 30 seconds after the movies where boys started sexually harassing the girls.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, are you on the rag? Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Getting your bra popped.
I remember this stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Brett K. We force young boys to. Oh, I shared that one.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
Oh.
We force young boys to sit at a desk all day and then stare in shock and horror at all the violent wood carvings on its surface. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good. Our daughter Madeline says, I remember being dumbfounded to hear that my friend who I'd been waiting all day to play with still couldn't play because of homework. So yeah, one of the things that there's an inflationary aspect to the school system. That is, the school day gets longer. It goes into the preschooling, the early education. It's like they want more and more
of you.
Meanwhile, homeschooling is notorious for being done by lunchtime.
Yeah. Well,
and getting better academic results.
Let me just tell you, okay, that's because they're not educating kids anymore. Okay, they're not really educating kids anymore. Okay, so we need to go back. The education did not need tinkering with. Okay, just stick to the trivium, and you're good. You don't know what trivium is? Look it up.
Okay, let's see. I read that one. Insulted 25 says homeschooling is great, but even better is networks of homeschooling families.
Yes.
Your kids need friends that come from families with the same values as you.
Absolutely.
And then segueing off, not fitting nicely into that, Kieran Alex says, he said he was raised homeschooled, then put in a good private school. And he says it was good when we had a homeschool group. We moved to a state without a good group, and it was horrible. Homeschooling is ideal when a community exists to support it. So thanks for sharing your experience. Agreed. I mean, man is a social animal. And I remember Academic Agent saying once he had a child, he's like, it is just not natural for it to be mom, dad, and baby, and you're on your own. He could feel that it was just wrong.
Yeah,
you should have extended support.
You need aunties, uncles, and
And if you don't have that, you plug in a homeschooling context. You plug into your homeschooled groups. You plug into your church, and you say, "Hey guys, we're on our own. We need to be having play dates. We need to be having other people in our lives so that we're not on our own." It is really unrealistic to have the atomized family of 3,
If you're in a rural community, that I could see that being an issue. But if you're in a city, oh my gosh, there's homeschool groups in every city now. There are Catholic homeschool groups here in St. Louis. There are secular homeschool groups here in St. Louis. And there are Christian homeschool groups, and there are Christians or homeschool groups that don't claim to be secular or Christian. They're just homeschool groups. I mean, there's literally everything across the board. And we knew a family from India who homeschooled their children. So there's an Indian homeschool group. I mean, it's like it's very diverse. Very diverse.
Okay, gonna have to stop there because we're fitting this in between in the middle of my workday.
I gotta go homeschool my kids. We're going to the library.
The middle of our workday. So thank you, everyone. I hope this was interesting. Obviously, this is a emotional and issue. If you have concerns, just remind you that we have a very special offer that most channels don't have, which is if you go to the video description, you can find a Discord invite. Click on that, join the Discord server run by our friend Luke, Lambda. And there's a channel there called the Mrs. Radlib channel. Come right in there, post your question. There's a great community there, and my wife herself is constantly in there. So if you want to talk more about this, there's a place for you to do it. Okay. Thanks, everybody, and appreciate your support, sharing the streams around.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.